The sun hung low over the bustling streets of Nairobi, casting long, golden shadows that stretched across narrow alleyways and winding roads. The air was thick with the scent of roasting maize and the distant aroma of spices wafting from street vendors' stalls. Voices rose and fell, a chaotic symphony of bartering merchants, laughter, and the occasional honk of a passing matatu. In the heart of a crowded neighborhood, where corrugated iron roofs glinted under the waning sunlight, an 11-year-old girl named Amani moved with quiet determination. Her deep brown eyes, filled with an intensity beyond her years, scanned the crumbling walls of a nearby building. While other children kicked around a ragged football, their laughter echoing through the dusty streets. Amani gripped a wooden plank she had carefully carved into the shape of a racket. With measured precision, she tossed a worn-out, deflated tennis ball she had salvaged from a junk heap and struck it against the wall. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The steady rhythm filled her with an unshakable resolve. A group of boys watching from a distance chuckled amongst themselves. One of them, a lanky teenager with scuffed shoes, shook his head as he passed. "Again," he scoffed. "Tennis is not for us, Amani. Play football like everyone else." Amani ignored them. They didn't understand. Tennis wasn't just a game to her, it was a dream. And that dream had a name: Roger Federer. Every evening after finishing her chores, Amani made her way to a small cafe on the main road. She had no money to step inside, but she didn't need to. Instead, she pressed her face against the cool glass window, peering in with unwavering focus. There he was, Federer, moving with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. His forehand was swift, his footwork effortless, his backhand a stroke of pure artistry. Amani didn't just watch, she studied. Every serve, every volley, every pivot of his stance was imprinted in her mind. One day, that will be me, she whispered to herself. But reality was harsh. Amani had no proper shoes, no racket, no court. Only an unshakable belief that, somehow, some way, she belonged in that world. Amani lived in a tiny one-room house with her grandmother, Mama Zuri. The roof, patched together with old sheets of metal, leaked when it rained. Their meals were simple: maize and beans on most nights, sometimes just tea when food was scarce. Yet despite the hardships, their home was filled with love. That evening, as they ate by the dim light of a flickering candle, Mama Zuri watched Amani poke at her food absent-mindedly. "You're thinking about tennis again, aren't you?" she asked gently. Amani hesitated, then nodded. "I just wish I had a real racket." Mama Zuri's heart clenched. She had given up so much just to keep them afloat. A tennis racket was a luxury beyond their means. She reached across the table, her calloused hand enveloping Amani's. "Dreams don't come easy, my child. But if it's meant for you, you will find a way." Amani held onto those words like a lifeline. One afternoon, while peeking through the cafe window, Amani noticed an unusual excitement inside. The hum of conversation grew louder as the news anchor's voice boomed from the television. Tennis legend Roger Federer is coming to Nairobi as part of his foundation's charity tour, supporting young athletes in education programs for underprivileged children. Amani's heart nearly stopped. Federer, in her city. It felt like a dream. She pressed her palms against the glass, absorbing every detail. He would be visiting schools, meeting young players, and, most importantly, playing at an elite tennis club in the city. She had to see him. The next morning before dawn, Amani slipped out of the house. She had no money for a bus, but that didn't matter. Determination fueled her steps as she walked for miles, her bare feet pressing against the scorching pavement. The journey was long, the sun unforgiving, but she didn't stop. By the time she reached the tennis club, sweat trickled down her face. The sight before her took her breath away. The pristine courts, the towering fences, the gleaming white lines on the ground. She approached the entrance, her heart hammering in her chest. "Please," she said to the guard, "I just want to watch." The guard barely glanced at her. "Only invited guests." Amani stepped back, her chest tightening. Had she come all this way for nothing? Then, through a small gap in the fence, she saw him. The moment that changed everything: Roger Federer. He moved like he did on TV, fluid, powerful, effortless. The sound of his racket connecting with the ball was sharper, crisper in real life. Amani watched, spellbound. Then something incredible happened. Federer paused mid-play, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. His gaze landed on the fence where a small girl stood, wide-eyed, gripping a wooden plank in her hand. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then he smiled. To everyone's surprise, Federer started walking toward the fence. The guards hesitated, but when he motioned for them to step aside, they obeyed. He crouched down, now eye level with Amani. "What's your name?" Her voice trembled. "Amani." "Do you like tennis?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "I love it," she admitted, her grip tightening on her makeshift racket. "But I don't have a real one." Federer's gaze softened. Something about the fire in her eyes, the hunger, the belief, reminded him of his own childhood. Without hesitation, he turned to his assistant and retrieved a real professional tennis racket. He held it out. "This is for you." Amani's breath caught. "Really?" Federer nodded. "On one condition, you have to promise me you'll never stop playing." Amani's hands trembled as she took the racket. It felt heavier than she expected. It felt real. "I promise," she whispered. A local coach, who had been watching, stepped forward. "I'll train you," he said, "for free." A new chapter begins. From that day on, Amani trained harder than ever. She played until blisters formed on her hands, until exhaustion threatened to pull her under. But she never stopped. Within a year, she earned a scholarship to a prestigious tennis academy. With every match, she climbed higher, her name echoing in junior tournaments, then national championships, then, finally, on the international stage. One day after winning her first major title, a reporter asked, "Amani, what inspired you to become a tennis player?" She smiled, lifting the old racket Federer had given her. "Roger Federer. He didn't just give me a racket. He gave me a dream." Far away in his Swiss home, Federer watched the interview. A slow smile spread across his face. He had won countless trophies, broken records, and made history. But this, knowing that a small act of kindness had changed someone's life forever, that was his greatest victory.